Good morning. So we hear in the gospel reading, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The way that I was praying on this was the idea that the laws of the Old Testament are fulfilled through Christ. We hear that in the Gospel of Matthew when Jesus says, I did not come to abolish any of the laws, but to fulfill them. Well, what does this mean? Well, these laws that God has given us were never meant to be burdens on us, to hold us down. It is the way to live our lives in the right way, that we become closer to Him. We hear in Psalm 19, the law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The decree of the Lord is trustworthy, giving wisdom to the simple. The command of the Lord is clear, enlightening the eyes. See, the law of the Lord refreshes us. It brings us closer to Him. Even with the Sabbath, how much easier was it in the late 70s and early 80s when I was younger, when the blue laws were still in effect, that all these stores and options weren't open to us on Sundays. It was a day that the Lord gave us to be able to refresh through the whole entire week, that we could calm our lives down, which we can still do by honoring the Sabbath ourselves. But it was just easier when it went hand in hand with the secular law. It also makes us wise. How many of you have taught your children not to touch the hot stove? And how many of those kids grabbed the hot stove or had the hot pan? But they understood then that this wasn't a law that you gave them to forbid them from something. You weren't chaining them down. You were giving them knowledge and wisdom not to hurt themselves. We can look at it also, the law gives us joys to our hearts, that it opens our hearts up to be more Christ-like. These weren't ideas that we were out there just to chain us down, to say, don't do this, don't do that. It's because we want to live a life closer to God and to Christ. And if we listen to His precepts and His laws, we do it, and it's for our own benefit. Might not seem like it for the short-term goal, but for the long-term goal, it makes our lives so much easier. How many times have you been in a place that you wanted that extra piece of, you can look at me and always want the extra cannoli or something like that, but we end up that ends up hurting us in the long run. And it just gives the lights to our eyes. The law, like a headlamp that kind of shows us the path back to Christ at all times when we lose it. And it is the way that we can always be going towards Christ in an ever-changing world. As all these new modern technologies come out in front of us, we can use the laws to look and see how God wants us to use them properly. It always goes back to rules without love leads to legalism, but rules with love lead to life. And it allows us to trust in the Lord evermore.